Welcome everybody. This is the first episode of MMA Talk, episode 1. Today we're going to talk about the news about Jon Jones and UFC 295. First up, I want to talk about Jon Jones and his torn pectoral muscle. So what it did is change UFC 295, and now instead of Jon Jones, we're going to get an interim heavyweight championship match in the co-main event, which will be Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall. And your new main event is the old co-main event, which is even a better fight for me. And as a fan, I'm a bigger fan of this fight. Yuri Prohaska versus Alex Pereira for the light heavyweight championship. I think it's going to be a great show, a great event, especially that main event. That main event, probably a good co-main event. But I can't wait for it. It should be very good. I will make predictions on it once we get closer to time. But next week we'll make predictions on UFC Fight Night. Almeida versus Lewis. In that whole card. And I cannot wait for next week because I want to see how Almeida does. I think Almeida, I don't want to give my prediction away, but it's a pretty easy one for me to predict, in my opinion, but there's always a chance, as we've seen before, but I'm not going to go over it yet. But what we're going to do is go over what we think is going to happen with Jon Jones. So today's going to be a quicker podcast for this first episode. But we're going to end up talking about right here, right now, is what we see happening with Jon Jones next. Once he comes back, what I see happening, people are going to say it can't happen, but it's going to be the Conor McGregor effect and the Jon Jones effect. Like Dana said at the at the post-fight scrum, you're going to end up seeing Stipe versus Jon Jones when he comes back for the heavyweight championship, and then you'll get Sergey or Tom versus Jon Jones. And I'm going to tell you this now: don't be surprised if Jon Jones retires after the Stipe fight getting rebooked, and it's not Tom. He will fight Tom Aspinall. I'm not sure about the Sergey Pavlovich win, and he fights Sergey. So don't be surprised if you end up seeing Jon Jones retire after getting a rescheduled Stipe Miocic fight if it's not Tom Aspinall. I'm just telling you guys now, don't be surprised. And for Stipe, he's going to retire either way after that fight. Either win or lose, he's going to retire. More than likely, Jon Jones the same way if it's Sergey. You know what? I'm going to give you a sneak peek of one of my predictions for UFC 295, the main event. Do I want to do it yet? You know what? I'm going to do the co-main event that people are talking about because of the Jon Jones injury. Who do I see becoming new interim champion? I will go in depth on my prediction on the next predictions I do of the 295 prediction show. But I am going to tell you right now, Sergey wins. I think Sergey wins unless we see Tom Aspinall wrestle. Because I think Tom can get caught or a freak accident could happen. And I want Tom Aspinall to win this, but I'm going to go with Sergey Pavlovich winning this one. And I'll tell you in depth how I feel it'll happen on the next video. But I'm trying to think of a quick thing we can go over. down in the comments of this video, tell me if you're excited for UFC 295 or are you not excited because it was based on you and Jon Jones. Because I know Jon Jones and the name value and the legacy that he carries is such that a lot of people are going to be disappointed with this card because of it and might not watch it because of it. And I'm telling you now, I'd watch it because that main event and the co-main event could be fireworks. And I'd say they have a. Let me look over the card again. There's going to be some firework fights on there. And I'm telling you right now, Favola versus Benoit Saint Denis is going to be fight of the night. That's fight of the night. Don't be surprised if Mackenzie Dern and Andrade do an all right fight, a pretty good fight at that. So I'm telling you guys, don't sleep on the card. It should be very good. But we'll go over it in our prediction shows either next week, probably next week. But don't sleep on the card, UFC 295. I think it's going to be a very solid card, if not great card, with action. I think it's going to be very action oriented. And I'm going to give you an overview of next weekend's Almeida versus Lewis card. Do I think it's a great or a sleeper or like a bad card? Let me look at it real quick. It's a sleeper card. It is because there's going to be some like big outcomes here. The Bonfim brothers, Braulio, who I think is one of my favorite prospects. Okay, don't come for me. But Caio Braulio reminds me of Paulo Costa with just a more wrestling base to him. And Elvis Brenner, I'm very excited about facing. That's going to be a sleeper main event of the prelims if it stays that way. Elvis Brenner versus Ribovics. I think two of the best prospects, one from Argentina, one from Brazil. It's going to be very good. I think it's going to be a very good fight, not fight of the night for me of that card. But we'll get more into that next week, probably on Monday. But I think that's all I got today. Oh, actually, I'm going to give a prediction now because I haven't done it yet. And I'm going to give a prediction Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou. I'm going to take this quick, get it out of the way. What we're going to end up seeing is we're going to see. I'm going to be with my head, not my heart. So Tyson Fury stops some TKO referee. That's what I see happening. I'd be happy if he doesn't get stopped. But I'm gonna say this with my head: Tyson Fury TKO round 3 or 4. That's my safe pick here with my brain. But I would love to see a KO from Francis, but I don't see it happening. There's always a chance, but I don't see it happening, guys. But yeah, that's gonna be my pick. He's gonna be Tyson Fury TKO, 3rd or 4th round. So I'm happy for Francis though. Francis getting his money is amazing. And Francis deserves this money he's getting. He does. From just his story to what he's done in UFC and MMA, he deserves this. And him going to PFL, I'm not mad at it. He's going to make money there too. I'm going to tell you now, a lot of those fights, if they are not signing people in that heavyweight division, are going to be like quick knockouts. I'm telling you now. Because all Francis is going to have to do in PFL, if they don't sign good free agents heavyweights, you're going to see him just swarm them with punches and knock them out. So hopefully they do sign some guys in for that. But I think that's almost the end of the video, guys, because I'm trying to think. Is there anything else in my brain that we needed to discuss in UFC land? I'm going to go over this real quick, actually. I know it's a little late, but 294 results. But I haven't talked about it yet, um, so no, uh, you know what? I'm going to expose myself for betting on Volk. I bet on Volk, and I bet on Islam. Okay, so I've had double bets just in case. So I lost money in both ways. You want to know why and how? I bet on Islam via submission. Should have knew on short notice. I had a feeling, and that's the only thing I didn't bet on either way was that. So it's kind of it's my fault though. Let's be honest, it is my fault. I should have known better. But for me, I'm happy for Islam. Islam to me deserves pound for pound number one. He beat the number one, well, not number one, but the number two pound for pound fighter twice. And at the time, I think he was number one on the first fight. But I'm going to tell you this, I'm not going to get upset about it. Pound for pound's a subjective list, very subjective. And I'm wondering more and more if sometimes pound for pound gets lumped in with historical achievements, because at points you'll see people like Volk who've had a great resume at featherweight, right? Do something great, right? Mighty Mouse was number one at one point. Sorry for that. I'm back, guys. But like I said, I bet on everything except for the KO, and it's my fault. I didn't expect it. I did and I didn't because of short notice. It's the only thing I didn't bet on. But as I said, Volk beating him twice, I think earns Islam because of the more activity that he's had. A pound for pound number one, but it's subjective, and I don't get upset about subjective stuff. Because if you're subjective about it, like I can understand why they give it to Jon Jones. If you're telling me the grand scheme of his accomplishments, that's the only way I'll accept it. But if that's what they're doing with Jon, which I think it is, but I think that's where they are with it. Then let's go over the co-main event and what happened there. The decision of Hamzat beating Usman. See, it's weird for me here. I think, of course, Hamzat did win. I think he did, but it was closer the last two rounds. It legit was closer the last two. But I will say, I want Hamzat to do one more fight. I want Hamzat one more fight. And for me, Hamzat versus. I'd rebook him against Paulo Costa. I'd either do that or Jared Cannonier, or off the top of my head, I'm trying to think who else would be a great matchup off the top of my head. Izzy's taking a break, so you're not doing that fight. For me, that is what I'd say. And then you know what I would do? I'd do what Robert Whitaker's asking for. I think it's a great fight. I think people would enjoy it. Rob Whitaker versus Kamaru Usman. And this tells us exactly where Kamaru Usman's fully at with a full camp at that division. But I think Whitaker knocks him out or goes a decision. But I'd love to see that fight. I think it'd be very interesting styles make fights, and I think their styles mesh very well and could make a very fun fight, as well as Hamzat Paulo Costa. I'm telling you, either Hamzat Paulo Costa or Hamzat Robert Whitaker would also be sick. And you know what would be my first fantasy matchup if UFC signs a Michael Venom Page? I know a lot of people are not going to like it. It's either going to be Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Jeff Neal, or Shavkat. Those are my three names that I'd put MVP in there right off the bat because you got to get him a guy in the top 10 ish because you want to do what you did with Michael Chandler. See if he could sink or swim. And I think some of those he could sink with. And I think Shavkat he loses just by a submission or a takedown. I think he loses it that way because Shavkat's inconsistent because of his defense on the feet. But I will say, I think he could beat an older Wonder Boy by a decision. I think he could beat Jeff Neal via KO if Jeff Neal's not safe, especially with like a high kick because of the discrepancy in height. I don't think it's like the biggest discrepancy in height, but there's a little discrepancy in height. And MVP's pretty quick with his karate techniques. But I will say those interest me a lot for first fights for MVP. If he does sign with UFC, I really hope he does because I have a weird feeling that either I know I shouldn't mention it on this podcast, but I will. He's either might sign like Darren Till with Misfits Boxing, or he might sign with PFL. And I would really rather MVP sign with UFC than both. I know he has a connection with KSI, but now people are gonna hate this. I'm a younger dude still, and I grew up watching KSI. So I'm not as like I'm crazy not as much as I used to be, but like man, as a kid, that was my favorite guy to watch. But I'm gonna tell you this: I don't see MVP signing with Misfits Boxing. He could, he very much could with the relationship with KSI. But I see because Darren Till more than likely will sign with Misfits for a fight in boxing. Or I'm hearing they're doing MMA, which is not going to be safe. For if they put influencers in there, that's not going to be safe at all. But I'm going to tell you what I see happening is Darren Till signs with Misfits. I see MVP signing with the UFC. Hopefully, that's crossing my fingers on that one. But for this episode of the podcast, MMA Talk, episode 1, going over the whole Jon Jones situation, UFC 295, and some extra stuff on the side with MVP and all that. But this was like I told you at the beginning, it was gonna be a quicker podcast episode for the first one. See how I can get it out there, get to talk of this, like get my like happiness about the sport in like different things. If controversies or whatever comes out in the sport, I will talk about it. But this is my first episode of MMA Talk, and I would like if you could like, comment, and subscribe for more content. And if you like, please visit my community tab and vote in those polls. Please and thank you. That is it for MMA Talk episode 1. Thank you all for listening. And I'm out.